Yeah, and I think that's kind of the situation we've been in with both teams, the Jays and the Leafs. We get to the cycle, where we should be performing, and again, for a couple of those reasons, it just never seems to coalesce. Yeah. And it's hard to watch as a fan, because there are teams out there that are more driven and more motivated to bring home that cup. But yeah, it just doesn't happen for us.
It's a real shame. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the IPC podcast, where we answer questions, review Sundays, and tell some stories. As always, I'm joined by James. Hi, James.
Hi, Mike.
How are you feeling today?
Doing okay.
That's good. And of course, if you're watching online, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different than it has before. We've been recording these and shuffling furniture around in my office for the last 6 weeks as we've figured this, or 7 weeks as we've figured this out. But this room was sort of open, and all of this stuff is stuff we basically already had. And so we went, hey, let's just set up a space where we can come in and record. And then we've talked about how it'll be a lot easier to do things like update videos. I know that there's some story videos that are coming out that people are going to use this space for. So we've had a little bit of fun in here over the last week putting this together. What is the biggest challenge for you over the last week as we've pieced all this together?
It's been the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been using my cell phone for 6 weeks. And so the plan was to switch to a proper camera. But we have not been able to solve that problem yet.
So we'll take a crack at it between now and next Tuesday. We'll see how it goes again.
Yeah.
Well, this week was the last week of our Unshakable series, the Philippians series. The rocks are already off the stage. The lighthouse is on its way back into storage, I think, until probably kids camp, when it will come back out for our water theme. But, any thoughts just about either the series or, this past Sunday, if you want to get into that first? But we're heading out of Philippians. It feels like it happened fast. It was a quick 8 weeks.
Yeah. It does feel like it kind of flew by now that we're through it. It's nice to dig into the letters. And I think something that we don't do enough as churches is to take the letters as a whole. Often we'll pick texts or a section of text out of a letter, and we'll mine it, and we'll learn a ton from it. But we'll sometimes forget that it's pulled from the context of this broader letter. And so being able to go through a whole letter together as a church and understand the flow and the meaning and the theme from beginning to end, I think that's a useful practice.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really important. I mean, you know this about me, that things get put into context. And I think when you pull out individual verses as inspiration or as something to be encouraged by, and the entire story around that verse, it really makes a more lasting impact. At least it does for me. I think growing up, I was never a kid. I don't know what you were like growing up. I was never a kid who could memorize. So a lot of, Sunday school, or before I was in youth group, we had a program at our church called Pioneer Clubs, which was kind of like the Cubs, like the Christian version of Cubs or Beavers or Scouts or whatever.
We had cadets.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And we had a leader once who made us memorize the books of the Bible in order. And if we didn't get to go to gym and like play in the gym, or that, at least that was the threat. And it was very disheartening for me because I just couldn't do it. Like I could not do it. And it made me feel like a bad Christian because of it. It made me feel like not a great person because of it. And I think growing up, I learned, when you learn the stories, when you learn the context, when you take something as a whole, it's why I'm not as self-conscious about when somebody goes, oh, it's like that verse in Romans. And I go, Like, you're going to have to give me more than that. Because you give me the verse and I can probably give you the story before and the context after, but I'm just never going to be a chapter and verse person. And I think, like you said, when we do this, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. I think I'm a lot the same. The memory work was never high on my list of priorities. And even today, like I'll attribute things to the wrong person, like I did a few weeks ago. But concepts.
I don't think anybody noticed.
No, okay, well that's good. But concepts and ideas that are in Scripture, they're there. I'm not always going to be the one to say in the moment, like it's exactly 1 Peter 3 verse 7 that says. Right. But I could tell you that there's a concept in the Bible that talks about this, and I think that's okay. I think as long as we're not making up stuff,
that's the key.
Yeah. But to articulate your faith, I don't think you have to be able to, memorize every chapter and verse address, so to speak. So yeah.
Well, this week we got 3 points at the end because we just had to summarize some things and we tried to fly through them quickly. But Paul's final instructions are to pray for the things that you need through prayer and petition. Bring your requests to God and he will give you peace. And then Paul ends the letter about really talking about how what the Philippians have put into practice has encouraged him. And of course, throughout the letter talks about us putting things into practice as well. So I think we'll just hit all 3 of those here for a few minutes. We'll kind of give some final thoughts on the series. And then we'll look forward to what's next here coming up with Easter. That first section, through prayer and petition, my old youth pastor, this was his favorite verse. I remember him drilling it into us over and over. Through prayer and petition, bring your requests to God, and he will give you peace. What did you think of? What hit you when we were going through that part?
Yeah, and actually, I would throw on top of that the third part of that verse, with thanksgiving. When we go in prayer to God, God wants to hear from us. He wants to know what's going on in our lives. I mean, he already knows. It's a bit like a parent and child relationship, right? Your little one comes to you with a problem. Chances are you know what's going on in their life already.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
But you really probably appreciate when your child comes and tells you in their own words what they're struggling with or what the issue is or what they're happy about, right? And I think God wants that in our relationship as well. He wants us to come to him and tell him what's going on. Let him know what our heart is, and to do that in a grateful way. And I think part of that, again, I'll use the analogy of family again. Your child doesn't come to you with an expectation that you're going to be upset or admonish them, or the child comes knowing that you love and you care for them, and that you're going to help them solve whatever the problem is. And I think that, for me, that reflects a grateful attitude towards the relationship that you have. And so, again, coming to God with a heart of thanksgiving that this is God, this is Abba, your Father, who wants to shower you with his love and help you deal with whatever it is that you're dealing with. And we may not always understand why he asks us to deal with things one way or another, but I think that's where the peace comes in. And he also gives us peace about where we're headed and what we're doing with that problem, whatever it is. So, yeah.
I think the concept of asking for something that you need with a grateful heart is a hard one to thread. Like, I'm just thinking about that as you pointed out, and practically, I'm not sure I would be able to give a great answer to somebody who said, how do I ask for something that I need with a grateful heart? Like, I mean, that can be multiple things. Are you grateful for the things you already have? Are you grateful that you have the person? Like, there's multiple ways to look at that concept. But usually when you're in need, the last thing you're feeling is thankful or grateful. Usually, or at least that's not your knee-jerk emotion. Your knee-jerk emotion is, the hierarchy of needs, and this is what I need now. It's when you're extremely hungry, you're not always grateful that your fridge is full. You're kind of anxious that some of it isn't already in your body. How do we thread that needle here, especially when a lot of the things that we bring to God are big things?
Yeah. I think it starts with being thankful that we have a God who we can bring these things to. And I think that's where the gratefulness, the thankfulness starts from. And a God who cares enough about us to actually help us. Again, God wants to hear what we have to say and what we bring to him. And I think he wants to help us resolve it. And I think if we come to him, one, knowing that he's for us, and grateful that he's there, then it positions us well to also be grateful for whatever the answer is. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good start. I don't know. It's I'll try to remember that the next time I'm hangry. No, but I mean, I think that's one of those lifelong learning deals, right?
Yeah.
There are moments where we need to take a deep breath and step back and realize what we have, but it's practically sometimes very difficult to do.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like gratitude is, this old saying, attitude of gratitude. We used to sing a song, count your blessings, name them one by one, count your many blessings, see what God has done. And having that gratitude sort of requires remembering, on a daily basis, all the many things that you have and enjoy, whether those are things or relationships or blessings in your life, and remembering that those things aren't yours, they're God's, and he's given them to you out of his love and out of his grace. And I think if you can keep your eye on that on a regular basis, you just have a heart that's full of gratitude all the time. And it becomes easier to approach God that way.
Lauren brought one of these decorative signs. She was in the state. I don't know where it came from. It might have come from Hobby Lobby. I honestly don't know where it came from. But she brought one into our bedroom, and it said, "I remember praying for the things that I have now." Or it says something like that, right? Or I remember the days that I prayed for the things that I have now. And when she brought that in, I read that, and I was like, that's a good reminder. That's a good reminder to have in my face every day. As you walk around a house, or you walk around an apartment, or you walk around with a job, or you walk around with your kids, or you walk around with whatever, and you go, man, I remember when I didn't have this. And there's always more things to have and want. I think this is one of the fascinating things about people who have a lot of money, that the later in life they get and the more reflective they get, they go, it always felt like there was one more thing. Like it didn't matter how much money we had, there was always something that somebody had that I didn't have. And we, every once in a while we joke about not coveting your neighbor's goat or PlayStation or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's the concept of sometimes in order to be grateful, you need to stop looking so far. You need to close the lens in a little bit and just look a little bit closer. So
yeah, and it's Paul talks about it in the letter too, right? Like it's learning to be content, right? Paul says, "I learned to be content in need and in plenty, like in all situations." And so I think it's looking at your life and saying, all the things that God has given me, I'm grateful for them. But also, I have more than I need already. And so, just appreciating what God has done in your life and count your blessings and have that attitude of gratitude.
I don't know what it was, but at some point it was ingrained that, almost the beginning of every prayer is a thank you for. And I'm not even sure if I do that on purpose as much anymore, which is something I'm just realizing in the moment, which is maybe good because it means the muscle memory is there, but maybe it's not good. because it means I'm not being intentionally grateful. I'm going to have to think about this.
Oh,
But either way, the concept of starting a conversation with the things you're thankful for before approaching with the things that you need. But God still says, come with the things that you need. And through prayer and petition, you will find peace. And peace as a concept, not just of like, hey, you're going to get what you want. Because like we said on Sunday, peace and an easy life are not synonymous. Those two things aren't the same.
Yeah, and it doesn't say, by prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God, and God will grant your request. It says, and God will give you peace. That's an interesting distinction, I think.
I'm not sure that every time your life is easy, it's always peaceful.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a saying, the calm comes before the storm.
Right?
Yeah. So I think if life is easy, maybe you should put your head up.
Yeah.
'Cause,
which is why I'm grateful my life is very hard right now. It's very difficult. No, but can you talk about that? Like just the concept of peace and an easy life not being the same thing. I think that a lot of people that are outside our faith, one of the things you see, whether it's on college campuses with people doing apologetics or just, the things that something bad happens in the world and the things that people tweet, because Twitter is my favorite. For all the right reasons and all the wrong ones. It's just, you get such an eclectic view of everything. And the amount of people that are very upset at God for things that go wrong.
Yeah.
I think people really struggle with that concept.
Yeah, what's coming to my mind is, the story of the disciples in the boat. And the storm comes up, and Jesus is asleep in the boat, and the disciples are getting very upset and anxious about this storm. And so they wake Jesus, and I think in that moment he sort of rebukes them and says, why are you afraid, right? Like, you have me with you. You don't need to be afraid. But because they're afraid, he gets up and he calms the storm. And so I think in there's two lessons. One, in the midst of the waves and the rockiness of life, remember that you have Jesus with you. And just knowing that Jesus is on your side and that Jesus is with you, that's the kind of peace that allows you to navigate the storm. And then the other side of it is that, in those moments, we can call out to God. We can bring our prayers and petitions to Him, and God will, in His own way, calm the storm for you as well and bring you that peace. And I find a lot of times, when that happens, I'll cry out to God in the middle of a crisis or some anxiety-inducing situation, and then when it resolves. It's almost like I have to force myself to remember or to take that next step to go back to God and say, thank you, God, that you helped resolve this. I think we're too quick sometimes to say, oh, either it resolved itself or we did something to do it, and we forget to go back, to remember first that we prayed for it. We prayed for God to intervene and for God to bring peace, and then when peace comes, to remember that, oh yeah, I prayed for that. Go back to God and say thank you. So, yeah.
I alluded on Sunday, and I'm curious to hear your concept or your thoughts on this, to the idea that I struggle with knowing how people who don't have as Christ as a central figure can ground their peace. Like, I think I don't like to talk like this very often, but I think I'm defining reality as opposed to talking about why I like being a Christian. So, as long as we get those things out of the way, I think one of the benefits of being a Christ follower, of knowing where you come from, is being able to ground everything back to a central point that isn't moving. It's like God isn't a moving target to hit, right? The death and resurrection of Jesus happened, and who I am is who I am. And so it's not a moving target. And so when I'm the one that's moving, or when success or failure are the moving targets around me, in various contexts, the peace comes in being able to go back to that anchor point. But I don't know what people's anchor point is without Jesus, simply because show me anything in the world and I will show you how it can change. Like every anchor moves. Like everything that is solid and secure eventually changes or shifts. Every great power, country, that like it all, every law that you thought was terrific will it get adjusted or worked around or amended. Like there just aren't that many things in life that are, you know, and the joke you make is like death and taxes. You know, I don't find peace in much of those things either. So, you know, the things that are mostly immovable aren't really the things that I'm finding a lot of like, oh, well, at least there's taxes. like, how do you think that works? Like, peace is a moving target without Jesus, I really feel like.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's a way to approach conversations with people.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you find peace in? And then when they give you an answer that either you know is bogus or has holes, instead of going, yeah, well, yeah, but like, you don't be right in the conversation, but pursue it. Go, hey, like, but what if this happened? Would you just find something else that gave you peace? And people never get settled in. Maybe they do. I've just never been one of those people. And so this could be being very ignorant, but, I don't know. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I think it's a hymn, on Christ, the solid rock I stand. The picture that comes to mind for me, to sort of demonstrate this concept, again, it's biblical, going back to not being able to point to specific texts, but the concept is there, that we as Christians should not grieve as other people grieve. And it's in grief, I think, that there's a really, really good example of this. And I have friends who, you know, they've lost loved ones, and in conversation, you know, they have friends that will come and sit with them and who are not Christians and say, I don't know how you're coping with all of this. I don't know how you could, you know, still hold on to your faith in the midst of this. And you know, the response that was shared with me is, I don't know how you cope with this without faith. And I thought that was really beautiful. And also, you know, when we talk about grief, you know, we don't grieve as other people do who have no hope. And again, Christ is our hope. Christ is our firm foundation. Christ is the Prince of Peace. All of these things sort of tie together and ground you as a Christian in a way that I think the world, one, doesn't understand, but also desperately wants and desperately needs. And so, yeah, I think you're right. If we were to approach people, you know, instead of, I guess, reacting to things, but just saying, hey, what is it that gives you peace in your life? And then ask a follow-up question like, how's that been working out?
And be genuinely curious about that.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to get to a gotcha moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you can have that conversation and just not bring up the faith component of that conversation that day.
Yeah.
Circle back another time or wait for, but you know, sometimes you just ask a question to get other people thinking, which isn't a terrible idea.
Yeah.
You know, either. We were, Lauren and I were talking to a couple of people last night, and we were talking about this concept of, I think everybody thinks evangelism has to be like, well, if you don't know your Bible that well, or, you know, if you don't know all the stories, if you don't know all the answers, then you can't do it. Like, it's stories, man. It's telling people why you made the decision that you made. I told the story a few weeks ago, from the front about this guy that came to hockey that nobody really wanted to be there. But I had preached about Zacchaeus that day. And so like nobody really thought Zacchaeus should be there. And so it was going to be pretty hard for me to show up to hockey that week and go, well, I just told everybody else that the person that and nobody thinks should belongs, and then for me to not allow that to happen. And that's exactly what I told the guy. Like I said, look, there's a room full of people who don't want you here, but this is what I preached about this morning, and so I can't really not have you here. And this is, and it was the weirdest. It was just, I wasn't preaching at the guy.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I wasn't even telling him a story. I just said, hey, this is why I made the decision I made. Like, it's not right.
Yeah.
And you can ask that question from a peace perspective. Hey, like, why? What brings you comfort? What brings you peace? What makes you know that everything is okay?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people really struggle with that question.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they may have an answer in the moment, this is what gives me peace today or since the last crisis. But I think if you have the opportunity to, and again, we talked about this last week, if you can grow in relationship with a person, you can actually learn about them and about their story. You'll be able to see where the waves have been the most rocky for them in their life. And you could share, and again, instead of looking at their situation and being critical as a means of trying to share the gospel, you can talk about when the waves have been rocky in your own life.
Oh, sure.
Right? And you can sort of share what's given you peace and what's given you a firm foundation in those moments, which, is sort of teaching by example that you could have that kind of peace too. You don't have to flit from one thing to the next to see what the next thing is going to be.
Right.
But you can have that consistent, solid foundation in your life. And again, like I have enjoyed and experienced in my own life, right? So then you're sharing from your testimony, and it's not even a Sunday morning thing.
And that, what you said, leads so beautifully into that third part, which is the practice part.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell stories about your own life, or you're going to try to lead by example, or you want people to look at you as a person who's worth following, you have to act like a person who's worth following. That's the challenge, right? The challenge isn't just follow what I say. It's, can you live this out? Can people see your walk daily with how you walk?
Yeah.
And if you are saying one thing and acting another way, and then you see other people around you doing the same thing, you probably shouldn't complain about it, because they might be saying something different and then doing something different than you are, but they're following exactly what you're doing, which is saying one thing and doing another thing. Like, you've got to be consistent across the board. It's why the practice piece is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, we touched on this a bit last week when we talked about how we relate to the law as well. It's a process. Who I was 10 years ago as a follower is very different than I am today. And today is going to be very different than 10 years from now, because I'm on a journey of becoming just like everybody else is. And so in saying that, I wouldn't want anyone to walk away and feel like they're not measuring up either, right? But we should be moving towards something. We should be moving towards being more Christ-like, so that our practice what you preach, right? So what you say you believe becomes more and more a part of your identity and who you are, so that it, again, spills over into the people around you, so that they can see without you having to say anything, right?
And even, hockey, just they're all the best examples for me, because just we all whatever at hockey sometimes. I play hockey with a guy who's a youth pastor, He's terrific. He's a great guy. He is. If he was your kid's youth pastor, you couldn't be happier with like the type of person that your kid would land with. And I mean, there's tons of people that work with youth all over. I think we've got a great one in Brittany. But this guy's just who you'd want your kids to hang out with. And he has demonstrated that week after week for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years at our hockey hour. But I don't know, about 3 months ago, he was playing against another guy who did something that made this guy really angry. And he went off on him loudly in an echoey arena. And the reason he went off on him is because one of the kids that this guy youth pastors was out at our hockey hour, and the other guy laid him out. And so he came to the defense of one of his youth, but the way he did it made this guy who got attacked go, I hope if that guy was my kid's youth pastor, I'd pull him. Like I'd pull my kids out of youth. And, the youth pastor, the guy that I know, doubled back later and apologized and said, hey, I shouldn't have done that. And the guy who laid the other guy out didn't apologize. And none of that is really relevant other than to say, you can have righteous anger and you can have a righteous feeling of something needing to be corrected. And even doing the right thing, like coming to the aid of somebody, can still not be practicing your faith well if it's not done right. And that's what makes it so hard. And that's where you look for grace and forgiveness from the people around you. But I think sometimes we justify righteous anger to just be able to act however we want. But not everybody knows that anger is right. That anger is righteous when they're watching. Yeah. And I think that's worth considering.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the part, you just sort of flew by it, but he went back and apologized.
Yeah.
There's an integrity piece there that, we're not going to get it right all the time. We're still sinful people who make bad decisions. And that will continue until we are fully redeemed, in our resurrected bodies, in heaven one day. And so, having enough self-awareness to say, I really didn't represent Christ well in that moment. I didn't represent the kingdom or who I say that I am as a follower, and I need to go back and I need to apologize. I need to make that right. I think that's an important piece too, because the world sees both, right? They see you when you're on your game, but they also see you when you're dropping the ball. And if we don't help them reconcile those two, they'll do it for us, and they'll do it by saying, "Well, it must not be real. It must not be authentic." But if we can be intentional about reconciling those differences through integrity and through, coming in and making an apology or whatever the situation calls for, that's a witness too, right? That's a testimony as well. So, yeah.
I think we always need to be aware of the way we're acting. And, and I think something you mentioned that you liked that you wanted to touch on too was Paul acknowledges here at the end of this letter, like, I have everything I need. I have the peace that transcends understanding. I know where I'm going, but boy, did I still really appreciate that you reached out. And I think that's an important conversation for us to have too, because, I think although Christians might have a level up or a foot up on a secure part of peace or where that goes, it doesn't mean we always feel peaceful or that we're conceptualizing it well. And, here's Paul who says, I'm fine, but he's still in prison and he's still been running around and there's still lots going on. And it still meant something to him that people reached out. And so the practice piece of, right, hey, can you reach out to somebody even though it looks like they might have it all together?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a dynamic there of, what's happening internally and externally. We talked a little bit already about the external things, right? How do you demonstrate peace and so forth and integrity and everything in your interactions with others, your witness and your testimony? But there's an internal piece at the end of Paul's letter, right? That says, how do we act as Christians towards each other? And it's positive because he's talking to the Philippians, so it's a mostly positive letter. And so he says, I do have everything I need, but I sure am grateful for you. And again, it's that thanksgiving towards your fellow believer. Now, Paul received encouragement. He received financial support from the Philippians. He received, I'm just going to say encouragement again because I can't think of another one. But he received from that church things that were important and valuable to him in his ministry in Rome. Again, I think it's really interesting to think about the fact that Paul's writing this letter from prison. Paul is in prison for preaching the gospel, for being a Christian. And in prison, with the gifts that he receives, the encouragement that he receives, he supports other churches. He writes letters to encourage, to teach, to instruct. But he also, converts his guards, and the people in the palace where he's held. He's teaching and preaching and spreading the gospel in Rome, in the center of, the secular world at the time. There's an external and an internal component to what Paul does, and I think there's an external and internal component in terms of what we're called to do as Christians and as a church too. We have this incredible peace from God. We need to share it, but we also need to have peace, for each other, with each other in the church too.
Well, that's the book of Philippians. Any final thoughts on the series or the things that you think people should pull or hang on to? Is there anything that we blew past that you wish we had spent more time on? I know he talks a little bit about a couple of other people, and especially at the end, there's I hope you two can figure it out. I hope you guys can get along, and we weren't able to get to everything. But is there something here that we covered that maybe sticks out to you the most over the last 8 weeks as we sort of wrap this one up?
No, I think we've probably covered most of the stuff that's in the book that, we've done a pretty good overview. I like some of the stuff that Paul says about his co-laborers in Christ. Again, the expression of support, the encouragement, the building up of one another. It's not just about encouraging a church. It's about encouraging the church. And I think that's a good takeaway for me. And this is a good book for us to study at IPC, but it's a good book for the church to be reminded of, the large C church to be reminded of how we live and behave and interact. It's interesting. One of the comments or feedbacks from the week of prayer that I received, talked about this idea of unity in the church, and that was it's a big deal in the Bible, but it was certainly a big deal for Paul in a lot of his letters, right? And I think it's present here too, that for the unity of Christ. That's how do we do that well and make it a priority? So.
And I think when we talked about unity, we acknowledged that it doesn't always mean you agree on everything. And we understand that there are a lot of people with different theological stances on a handful of things that are under these four walls and this roof. But what are we unified in? And that's always the one that we circle back on.
Yeah.
The citizenship in heaven, the dual citizenship.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm ever going to forget that one for a while.
Yeah. But, and Jesus, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, the rock on which we stand. He's at the center of it all. For us, for our neighbors down the road, for our mission, and every method that we choose that comes out of that, Christ-centered, right? So, yeah. I
think my favorite part was taking the zoom back, even while we look at 1:6, which is right behind you, right? You began a good work and you will carry it on to completion. for almost our whole lives, we look at that you and we think me, but we don't think that he's talking about a whole church or maybe the capital C church. We zoom it in so far. And I think that one of the things that I really enjoyed doing in this series was trying to zoom the lens out at least as far as the church and go, when Paul's talking, he's talking about the collective, and the individuals within the collective have a responsibility in order to make the collective work. But, Paul wasn't writing a letter just to James or to Mike. In fact, neither of us. He was talking to the collective.
Yeah.
And I think when you read the letters that way, it really changes, a lot about how you view either what he's saying, but also what the church should be doing and what that looks like. That, I think for me, that was the most fun, to try to just find one or two things every week that were a little bit different, that reminded people or taught somebody that this is to a much bigger group than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're going to take a 1 week break from series. Fred's coming in on Sunday to preach. Maybe we should see if we can get him in on Tuesday.
Yeah.
To get him in here to talk a little bit more about that. Because I won't be here on Sunday. And so I'll have to listen to it, or I'll be flying a little bit blind in that episode. But, and then we're going to roll into Easter and get that series going. And then we've got a really cool series coming up in April where we're going to talk about how crazy it was that Abraham and his family just got up and left. And as our church sort of begins its final season, as we sort of move out of the denomination, there's the concept of you've been part of something for so long. That change sounds wild. And the reality is although that may be true, when Abraham leaves his family land and the inheritance and the security and all of the pieces, because God just says it's time for you to go. Culturally, that decision was wild. And so I'm excited to sort of dig into the similarities between what we are going through and what Abraham would have gone to in context in that time. So
sounds good.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anything to talk about Alpha? I think we want to make sure people know how to sign up and that we would like them to.
Yeah.
And talking about misspeaking, I perhaps might have implied to people on Sunday that you can just show up without signing up, which you show up without signing up and we're not going to turn you away, but we would like to make sure we have enough food there.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do people sign up for Alpha, and how do they start to get involved as participants, people who are there to take in the content?
Yeah. So you can sign up, and I would encourage you, if you plan to attend Alpha in any capacity, to actually go to our website and register for Alpha, because that will absolutely help us know how many meals to prepare, and also how many volunteers we're dealing with, and also to build. There's a little bit of pre-work in terms of building small groups to make sure that they're going to function well. So it's good to have all of the pieces on the chessboard, so to speak. So go to the website or the app, register, and once you're registered, think about who you might invite, and you can go and invite them, but don't just invite them. Offer to help them register too, because they may not know necessarily how to do that or what to do with our website, et cetera. So, if they, express an interest in coming, help them out.
I will try to guess at some of the frequently asked questions. But James, I'm not sure I can make all 12 weeks. Should I still register anyways?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. James, I'm not sure that I have somebody that I can bring. Am I allowed to come by myself, or do I have to bring somebody along with me?
No, you can come on your own. I would say consider whether you want to volunteer or be a host or take take part in hospitality or some other way of sort of making sure that Alpha happens. But yeah, you can absolutely just come.
Hey, James, can I skip the meal and just come for the other part? Is that a good idea?
Well, I think it's a terrible idea. Only because, like, the food's going to be really good.
It's going to be really good.
So, you can skip the meal.
Yeah.
I just honestly don't know why you would.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
That's
anyway.
a crazy notion. Yep. And of course, if you're having any trouble or you're not a digital person, you're probably not hearing this instruction through this medium anyways. But if that's true and you actually don't like signing up for things online, just call the office or email James at thrive@ipc.com or call James and
we'll get you registered.
We'll get you in there and ready to go. It's soon, right? We're 4 weeks away.
About that, yeah. March 20th is the first night, and we should be doing a training night with some of our volunteers probably the week prior. So yeah, we really need to get those registrations in and know what we're dealing with. So
very cool. Well, look out for that, and I'm really excited to see how this goes. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
James, what are you up to this week? What are you excited about? What's going on?
I forgot to write stuff down. I have a reading week. So the way my course is laid out, I go every other Friday to Toronto. So this break is 3 weeks before I go back. So I'm kind of in limbo there, a little bit of time to get caught up on reading and so forth. Prepping for Alpha. Yeah.
And even though you didn't have to go to Toronto last week, we went anyway.
We did, yeah.
We went on a road trip, and we survived the traffic and the food truck. Which we're not really sure what the food was that we ate or what it was spiced with or what was in it, but we survived it.
Yep.
So here we are. Very good. Well, thanks as always for hanging out, and thanks for helping put this new space together so that we can just sit down and get these done. And that, hopefully, I think one of the things we hope for is to be able to use this space for other people to come sit and have conversations, or for us to be able to have more frequent conversations with other staff members or other people in around and just start telling some more stories. We're excited about that.
Yeah. And we don't have to clean up afterwards.
That's right. Just turn all the lights off and walk out.
Yep.
I'm going to bring my plant back to my office.
Oh, well, fair enough.
Because windows.
And it needs light.
Yeah.
Well,
as always, if you have any questions, ask them.
Questions at Thrive at IPC.
We still only have that one.
We must not be saying controversial enough things.
We really, I think we need to start saying some stuff. I'm not sure what that's going to be. So here, I'll start.
Okay.
This 7-game win streak that the Leafs are on means absolutely nothing in 2 months. There's my hot take. Austin Matthews can have 70 goals and the Leafs can win 12 in a row, but talk to me in April or talk to me in May.
I don't know that Leaf fans are really that adversarial.
Oh, I talked to somebody this morning.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we kind of know. We kind of know the lay of the land, and we enjoy it when they win, but we've gotten used to disappointment.
It was in the hallway. I was dropping Waverly off for school. It was the hallway in the school. One of the teachers came up to me and went, "Hey, 7 in a row." And I went, "It's like 7 what?" It's like, Leafs won 7 in a row. And I went, "Oh, well, okay."
How are the Bruins doing? Genuinely asking. I don't know.
They are on a losing streak.
Oh.
They're on a overtime losing streak. So they seem to be making it to overtimes and shootouts and then losing a lot of them. They actually have the, out of 32 teams, I think they're 28th in leads held in the third period. So they can't hold on to a lead. But because they won 25 of their first 27 games, there's this phrase that says you can't make the playoffs in the first 25 games of the year, but you can miss the playoffs in the first 25 games of the year. And so, they're fine. I don't think they're going to make it out of the second round. They're not deep enough. But, it's fun to see them win. I think they're in first or second place in the Eastern Conference. So, but I don't know. I don't have high hopes for them making a cup run, but you never know. They'll surprise me one of these times, and it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah.
And we can only hope that happens for Toronto fans. But please, after I'm gone, because I don't want to live through it. I don't want, like, I'm a Bruins fan. And when the Bruins won the Cup in 2011, it was a blast. Yeah. It was so much fun to watch. And then they lost it, like they lost in 6 games in 13 and a heartbreaker. And then they lost in 7 games in 19. And those were both tough. And people would, you couldn't finish it off. I'm like, well, okay. But like they went to game 7 and they were tied in the 3rd period. And I got to watch them win one 10 years ago. So like that was pretty cool. And so I think that every sports fan should get to watch their favorite team win. Yeah. But I just feel like I have so many friends that will be insufferable if it's the Leafs. Oh, like it's going to be like, whoa, like when's the last time the Bruins won? And I'm going to go, come on.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, after what's it been, 60 years?
67. Well, in 1967, right?
Yeah, I think you could forgive a few people for gloating a little bit.
I mean, and that level of forgiveness from you only comes from Jesus, because I do not possess that much. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, the argument's like the Leafs last won in 67 and before the Bruins won in 2011. Yeah. Their last win was 72. Yeah. But that's like me walking around and people going, well, when's the last time the Leafs won? It's like as if I was alive. Like, not even close. Like it was 15 years between when they won a cup and when I existed. Like I'm not going to gloat about that one. Yeah. So for my Leafs fans and friends, I hope that they win one because I think you guys should get to experience what it's like to win a cup. And I think the parade would be very cool. Yeah. Just don't talk to me about it. like I will tell you I'm happy for you. But like the next year when they go on a 10-game winning streak and you're starting to plan a dynasty, I'm going to have to find my eyes because they'll be in the back of my head so far. Anyways.
Fair enough.
But you're more of a Jays fan anyway, right? Spring training?
Baseball, yeah. I spent a lot more of my my time watching baseball.
Tell me this. How are you feeling about Manoah? Manoah's back. He's slimmed down. He looks like he's got the mojo.
I don't know. I haven't picked up on spring training yet. I've been a little busy for that. But I did hear that he's on the roster. And my initial reaction was one, I'm excited for him because I know when he went back down, there was a lot of talk that he may never come back up. So I'm excited that he's back. I hope that he's able to stay out of his head and play good baseball. Time will tell.
All right. Way too early predictions. It is 12:07 on February the 20-something. What's today? The 28th?
27? I think, yeah.
Okay. Do the Jays make the playoffs?
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Well, my next 3 were: do they make the divisional and the championship and the World Series? So you're gonna they're you think they crater, or they're right there and they just miss the target, or what's?
I think it's the what plagues Toronto teams in general. They're gonna play well. They're gonna play not so well. The stadiums are gonna be full no matter what. Mm-hmm. So there's not a ton of incentive. Mm-hmm. And I think the leagues are a little biased towards American teams. So that's an opinion.
Are you saying they're not going to get the calls? You saying the strike zone's a little smaller up north?
I think it's a combination of maybe a little bit of that, but also, does the league want Canada to win? Do the players, really need to put it out there if they're rock stars in Toronto anyway? Sure. I don't know. I have yet to see a team go the distance because they want it that bad. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of the Leafs, and it's true of the Jays. Yeah, I don't know. Call me a pessimist, but
you heard it here first. The Major League Baseball has a bias against Canada. The umps do it differently when they come north, And Rob Manfred refuses to allow the World Series trophy to make it to Toronto. So, but that's reassuring to know that no matter how good they are, it's really not their fault.
Yes.
Which is the general attitude of the Toronto fan. Okay, and with that, we hope that you all have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you again really soon. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll see you later.
Take care.